Hello, my name is Jessie Fuentes, and it is always a pleasure to be your moderator. Welcome to the Conversation Among X, brought to you by Tu Cuenta Cine Youth Fest and powered by HITN. Today we will discuss social activism in film, tales from the year that was, one of the most important topics and probably one of my favorites. As we discuss activism in the industry, I want to remind our audience that our live series leads up to our film festival that starts September 18th. And it is a pleasure to announce that we have received more than 400 films and 132 of them are in the running. We are so grateful for every young person who submitted their films to have their voices be heard. The film festival will be impossible without you. Please go to cineyouthfest.org to see the films and follow Tu Cuenta Cine Youth Fest and all of its platforms and updates and information that we have to offer you all. Today, I want to acknowledge that we are here and we are in the remembrance of the memory of Alex Guzman, a young activist in the film industry from the Bronx who dedicated his life to sending important messages. He was a gem and a true gift. We will miss him in the film industry. His community will miss him and his family will miss him. Let's remember him by watching this piece.
Alex was all about the things that really matter: family, friends, social justice, and human rights. As a preschooler, Alex identified and shined a bright light on the social injustices and violations of human rights he saw in his rapidly gentrifying community, and as young children do, demanded that his parents fix them immediately. This early focus was honed as Alex became more deeply enmeshed with advocating for social justice, equity, and human rights for all, particularly for people of color, women, LGBTQ populations, people experiencing homelessness, incarcerated youth, and the mentally ill. The arts, particularly film, became a way for Alex to understand these issues on a deeper level, a way to make others aware of the issues, and a way for Alex to express his feelings about them. Alex's advocacy had an impact on engaging his friends in the struggle and on the social justice issues he addressed. The world is now a darker place without Alex and the light he used to expose injustice at every level.
Alex Guzman was a prime example of what it meant to use film to elevate voices that are unheard in our society. Today, we hope to dig deep on the conversation of activism and what it means to utilize film to combat injustice. I want to thank you all for joining us. Today, we're going to have an extremely important conversation. And before we introduce our panelists and introduce their bio packages, let's take a look at mine.
Jessie Fuentes is an activist and educator in the Humboldt Park community in Chicago, Illinois, popularly known as Paseo Boricua. Fuentes has participated in work empowering young people in the community, the campaign to release Oscar Lopez Rivera, anti-gentrification work, education reform, and for the independence of Puerto Rico. Fuentes is currently the Director of Policy at the Puerto Rican Cultural Center and Policy.
You can help him. Just think of a way and ask yourself, what would Oscar say? Oscar would say he is a product of colonial aggression, that he has been beat up and made empty by the cycle of oppression. But our people need love. Our people have been raped, pushed over, and shoved, and it must stop. We must pick up our women, nurture our children, and show our youth there's no need to be afraid of the cops, you see. This is just another example of what this system has done to our people. And this system will continue if we can treat them like our equal. Que viva Puerto Rico libre.
Thank you. I am so indebted to HITN and Tu Cuenta Cine Youth Festival for putting together such an amazing reel of my activism. But today it's not about me. It is about the panelists that we are so privileged to bring to you all. It is a great pleasure to introduce the bio package of SOFÍA MURIENTE.
SOFÍA GALLISÁ MURIENTE is a visual artist working through multiple approaches to documentation, deepening the subjectivity of historical narratives and examining formal and informal archives, popular imageries, and visual culture. She studied film and TV production and Latin American studies at New York University and has participated in experimental pedagogical platforms led by artists like NOX School and Better Locals La Práctica, substituting graduate studies with a process of learning and unlearning with others. Her work has been featured in the New York Times, Art in America, Terremoto, and Hyperallergic, and earned her grants from Teorética and NALIC. She has been exhibited in the Whitney Biennale, the Queen's Museum, IFA Gallery in Berlin, Museum of Contemporary Art in Puerto Rico, Malva in Argentina, and CCA Glasgow, among others, and Puerto Rican galleries like Kilómetro 0.2, El Lobby, Diagonal, and Embajada.
SOFÍA, tell me, what do you think about that reel? Oh, unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I was blushing.
It's fantastic. They did a phenomenal job. You run by a motto of learning and unlearning with one another. Probably the most radical way of moving in a film industry, but more importantly, as an individual activist. Tell me, what are some of your thoughts?
I mean, for me, I think making art is also a process of learning and unlearning and looking for ways to learn from others. So, you know, I really, I think, you know, that it's not just about the final product, definitely, but very much for me about the process of working with people and working in different communities. And so, you know, for me, filmmaking or you know, working in visual arts is really about, you know, using art as a mechanism to start conversations.
Absolutely. And we're going to dig deeper. Before we do, let's continue to introduce our panelists. It is a great pleasure to jump into the bio package of a really good friend of mine. I've known him since I started as an activist here in Humboldt Park, my really good friend, Matt McCanna.
Born and raised in Harvey, Illinois, Matt McCanna doesn't like titles. That's why he says he's a videographer. Well, that encompasses many skills. So he's a producer, cinematographer, director, editor, but most of all, a dreamer. He dreams of an equitable world and works hard every day so his work reflects that dream. One of his mottos is to be able to achieve change, you must commit yourself to be part of it. Matt's work explores health, culture, resistance, identity, and social movement. For more than 10 years, Matt has worked and trained in varying degrees of film and documentary production in Chicago and New York, including 2 videos for the campaign to free Oscar Rivera. His current work focuses on video as a mechanism for community building. He collaborates with the National Museum of Puerto Rican Arts and Culture, the Puerto Rican Cultural Center, and the Albizu Campos High School in the Humboldt Park community in Chicago, raising awareness of the importance of our Latino roots.
How are you feeling, Matt?
Feeling blessed to be alive, number one, and also to be here with you to discuss one of my favorite subjects, film and activism.
Absolutely. And we're super grateful to have you back in Chicago. New York stole you temporarily, but we have you right back where you belong. And we're going to dig deep into all of your work, your aspirations, and your dreams of what film can be. But before we get there, I want to be able to introduce another bio package of a so talented young man, an ability to truly draw messages and articulate them and visualize them in ways I don't think a lot of people could. Let's take a look at the bio package of Raymond Arturo Perez.
Raymond Arturo Perez is an LA-based television writer and creative hailing from San Antonio, Texas, who most recently served as staff writer for Season 2 of Selena, the series on Netflix. As a writer, Raymond aims to broaden the film and television canon with stories of Latinx people, queer people, and other underrepresented communities. In 2014, Raymond graduated from the University of Texas at Austin with a BBA in marketing and a BS in radio, television, and film. He received his master's degree in screenwriting in 2019 from the American Film Institute, which is currently ranked as the #1 film school by The Hollywood Reporter. When Raymond isn't writing at his kitchen table, he can be found on the dance floor getting down to salsa, merengue, bachata, and cumbia.
That last shot in your reel is so real. It better be your profile picture in every platform.
That was so extra. I lived for it. Thank you.
No, you are extremely talented, and I'm super excited to dive into a conversation of what it means to have Latino representation in film and your aspirations to really convey that through your work. Before we get into that, I want to be able to introduce our very last panelist, who's extremely talented, and I can't wait to have a dialogue with him and really dig deep into his perception of activism in the world of film. Let's take a look at the bio package of Steven Cruz Rivera.
Steven Rivera, also known as Cruz Rivera, founded Indie Films Puerto Rico in January 2015. Born on April 7th, 1989 in Arecibo, Puerto Rico, Cruz is a self-taught director of photography that has worked on music videos, fashion films, short films, TV productions, and as creative director for brands, record labels, and artists such as CINE Linux, Warner Music Latina, Pina Records, UMG, Rimas, and many more.
Steven, when I read your bio, right, I was like, there could be no one more fun than Steven, right? With the way he produces and takes visuals and really is able to put together such an artistry through film. I was dying to meet you.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. I'm very grateful to be here, part of this conversation with all these amazing panelists also.
Yes. And I want to thank you for all of the work you do to ensure that there's representation of our people and our communities, whether that is through music, short films. You are doing a phenomenal job. Let's bring in all of our panelists and let's begin to dive deep into what activism can really mean in the world of film. First of all, I want to thank you all for taking the time to put together this show with us and to have a meaningful conversation that young people can really take pieces from and take that with them in their journey of going into the industry of film. You all, each of you all, are individuals that young people should all be looking up to. Individuals that look like them, come from communities that they come from, and put together work that really speaks to their lived experiences. I could not be more excited about having this conversation with you guys. As we begin, we know the best in film, like the best in any art form, provokes thought, emotion, sentiment, and action, right? Specifically, activism films by design are meant to provoke emotions and actions that are meant to fight injustices, that are meant to fight for a more equitable world, that are meant to create communities that our young people and our families could feel safe in, that we can watch film that speaks to who we are and that doesn't villainize us. I want you all to take a minute and think about a specific film you have seen that you consider to be an activist film. While you have this film in mind, I want you to name the film and the issue that you believe was designed to be highlighted. What social issue or social movement are we watching in this film that you're thinking about? As you're thinking about that, I want you to tell us what emotion it aroused in you. What action did it call in you, right? Film has an ability, unlike any other art form, to engage every part of us, right? So as you're thinking about this film, think about all of the emotions and the things that it evokes. And let's talk about it, right? Matt, let's start with you. What film do you have in mind? And tell us about that journey that you go on with that film and what issue it discusses.
I was fortunate enough last week to be in a screening for a documentary titled Takeover, and it tells a story about the Young Lords in New York from the 1970s when they took over the Lincoln Hospital in the South Bronx, and they demanded that the city build a new hospital that serves the community better than how Lincoln Hospital was. Lincoln Hospital was an atrocious place to go if you needed help to see medical attention. And so the young lords took it upon themselves to occupy that space and demand the city to build a new hospital. And I'm sitting there watching this archival footage, and when you sit down and you watch something that really impacts you, you get goosebumps all over, right? The shiver down your spine. And because I'm watching people that are so committed, disciplined, and organized enough to demand something that they want, to see change and to enact that change. So I was really taken for a ride, and after watching that movie, it prompts you to self-reflect and to see how can I move forward in a similar direction in my career.
Absolutely. Matt, do you want to tell us how do you think that film is going to shape you as a filmmaker?
Well, I think the experience of watching that film shaped me because it was coupled with a conversation with the young lords at the time who took over the hospital. And so to hear them speak their truth and to speak words of justice is really going to inform and shape how I tell stories in the future and the types of stories that I want to tell. Because there's a lot of impactful people around in Chicago where I am right now that I see doing similar things, and that I would love to document and to put out there so it can engage other people, like you said earlier, so it can engage the future generations of filmmakers.
Raymond?
I think my answer might be a little bit different from everyone else's, only in that a lot of the stuff that I'm focusing in on as a writer in film and television is fiction. And for me, I came into writing because I wanted to broaden the film and television canon with stories of people who look like me in my friend circles and other underrepresented communities. And but I gotta sell stuff to networks, and it's gotta be quote unquote entertaining and something that the business wants. So a big part of that is kind of sneaking in the messaging, like figuring out how I'm gonna, as I think SOFÍA mentioned, I'm putting the art out there in hopes that it sparks a conversation. And so for me, the thing that kind of sparked conversations for my family in middle school, as we started to watch television together during dinner, was Grey's Anatomy, Desperate Housewives, and Lost. I don't think we'd consider those activist films, but what it did was, for the time, which is also kind of laughable, is this was the most diverse casts on network television. And my folks who grew up in 90s SoCal, they lived in a community that really told them that anyone who doesn't look like you is your enemy. And so they had a lot of prejudices. But watching these shows, we were watching episodes that dealt with homophobia or racism, sexism, how socioeconomic status affects your privileges as a human being in this world. And so the conversations that we had after every episode of television that we'd watch were really genuine, authentic, raw conversations I don't think we'd otherwise be having as a family. And I'm just gonna zero in real quick on Lost, because I think of all the characters that existed in these programs. I think the least likely character that my parents would have interacted with willingly was this Muslim character on Lost. His name was Saeed. And, deep into the show, seasons in, there was this episode where it was all about Saeed's background story, which in a nutshell was to reunite with his long lost lover, something that anyone can relate to. It's about love, it's about romance. And when that episode finished, my parents, after years of watching the show and kind of poking at the bear of their prejudices across, different isms, were like, in their own words, were like, despite our cultural differences, we just want this character to be happy. And it was like a 180 for me. I'd never anticipated my family saying something like that about a character like Saeed. And for me, that was kind of the magic specifically of television, is that, these characters who may or may not look like you, may or may not have the same kind of cultural upbringings, they come into your home every week, and little by little, TV has the power of creating empathy and sparking these conversations. And so that's kind of why I focused on this spot.
Yeah, just to kind of follow up that thread, I think, there's so many different films that I can think of. I don't personally identify as a documentary filmmaker, but I was very much kind of shaped and fell in love with filmmaking because I was exposed to very powerful documentary films. And just thinking about one that really made an impact for me was the Battle of Chile, for example, which is a series of films shot kind of before, during, and after the coup d'etat in Chile in '73 by a group of filmmakers that just kind of went out into the streets and were participating as they were filming in these important political processes that were happening around them. And so, and for me, that idea of a filmmaker as someone who has a tool that can be deployed on the streets alongside, social movements, and not just document, but kind of actively participate in what is happening. And in the case of these films, be able to get that information out, to disseminate more widely knowledge of what was happening, is a kind of film that made me want to become a filmmaker, I would say.
I wasn't really a person that would watch documentaries as much as anything else, but in the latest 5 years, I'd say that I started looking into the Young Lords a lot, something that Matt mentioned, and I saw the Siempre Pa'lante documentary by Iris Morales, which was something that it allowed me to see how these people were, very how do you say, they were always together working as a community rather than individualism, as sometimes we see here in our island specifically. But yeah, Siempre Pa'lante was a documentary that probably opened my mind to more of the social activism stuff, and just digging in, since I'm very into music in general. I saw that Felipe Luciano was considered the godfather of hip hop, and that was something that got me more interested in just the social activism in itself. And obviously after we went through 2019, the summer of 2019, I think I got more interested and more active in my community, just helping and looking for ways to be better, and learning and unlearning stuff that we sadly we learned throughout the years, and we forget that we might hurt people with our ways of thinking or talking or whatever. And that's something that's been very special for me these last few years, just unlearning a lot of stuff and getting to learn more. Obviously, being in an industry that's a bit more machista, it's very difficult also to shift away from some of that stuff creatively speaking. But yeah, I'd say that's a film that's shaped me and made me go delve deep into social activism in general.
Yeah, I really appreciate that response, Stephen, because we know that we've grown up and we have watched films portray very racist, homophobic, and transphobic language and behavior that often has been detrimental to our communities. But I think that we're privileged to watch film really take a shift in portraying who we are as a people and our communities, right? And I think it's extremely important to acknowledge you all and the work that you are doing and how you are challenging yourselves every day to make a difference through film and to do it creatively and to have fun with it, but to know that there is a message and a movement to still keep up with, right? Some of you have actually made or are in the process of making films to address an issue that concerns you today or past issues that have been unresolved. I want you to talk to us about your current projects, these current films that you are working on. Why are you making it? What response are you hoping to achieve, right? How do you want your audience to feel? What emotions are you trying to evoke through the films that you are making? So, Sophia, why don't you kick us off in this portion of the dialogue? Talk to us about any projects that you are taking on today, right? And what greater message are you hoping that it has?
Well, right now, currently, this week, today, I mean, this mess of index cards behind me is part of the editing process of a video installation that I'm currently working on with a fellow Puerto Rican visual artist named Natalia Lasalle. And we were commissioned by the Contemporary Art Museum of the University of Southern Florida to produce a piece related to the Puerto Rican migration to Florida in recent years. And so we've been working on this for a very long time. We spent a month this summer driving around Central Florida. We've spent months before that speaking to different Puerto Ricans from different generations and socioeconomic backgrounds who have moved out to Central Florida in the last 10 years. And I think what we're trying to do is not a documentary. That was very clear for us from the beginning, that we felt that the resources we had and the time that we were going to be able to spend in Florida wasn't enough to make a comprehensive documentary about the Puerto Rican community in Florida, but that we could use the language of video art and experimental film to really honor the testimonies of many different people that we spoke to, but also kind of imagine and dream with them and kind of spend time with them and spend time in the spaces that they told us about and in different kind of social and community spaces related to the Puerto Rican community in Florida. And so right now we're working on a piece that is kind of telling a lot of these different stories of what this community has gone through in the last couple of years, but really trying to tell those stories or accompany those stories with visuals that allow us to imagine beyond the literal and beyond the direct representation of their stories and to think more broadly about the fantasies of these folks, the dreams of these folks, and also the challenge of how to depict very complicated and sometimes very tragic situations that Puerto Ricans have been going through in the last couple of years, dealing with Hurricane Maria and dealing, in this case, with displacement, beyond the kinds of images that are so common in media, and beyond that kind of journalistic gaze that we've grown so accustomed to in the last couple of years, but that so often can be really exhausting and draining in its insistence on depicting suffering and depicting grief and poverty and misery. And so we're, definitely honoring the tragic and complicated stories that we have heard and gathered from many people that we met, but also really trying to depict those visually in ways that move a little beyond that kind of restrictive and kind of victimizing gaze that is so often the way in which we're used to seeing those stories depicted.
Yeah, so right now working on myself more than anything, but lately I've been trying to shift more than into a role of a director, because I've been working as a cinematographer for the past, I'd say 8-9 years, but trying to get more into a director's role and have more control of the content I'm putting out, because obviously I'm sorry. I forget the words in English.
It's okay to say them in Spanish. It's okay.
Okay. So, para nosotros es bien importante el contenido que estamos sacando fuera, que somos responsables del contenido que sacamos y más en estos tiempos. Así que, obviamente, lidiando con los estereotipos, los clichés de la industria musical, pues quiero ir poco a poco haciendo un shift, saliéndome de esa caja y seguir mejorando cada vez más el trabajo que saco y obviamente pues que sea algo que se identifique en otros también, que no solamente la típica persona que escucha normalmente ciertos artistas del género, pero también que tenga, ¿sabes? Que el contenido que yo saque tenga algo de sentido, que provoque algún tipo de emoción, como estaban hablando ahorita, y que ayude a establecer otras conversaciones y también en el paso pues educar. Yo creo que es algo que necesitamos ahora mismo seguir mejorando y seguir educando con nuestro arte a aquellos que lo consumen a diario. Tenemos diferentes plataformas para seguir llegando a esas personas, y más ahora que tenemos TikTok, plataformas, los Reels de Instagram, etcétera, etcétera, y creo que son plataformas que nos brindan un espacio para poder seguir creciendo, educando y mejorando nuestro arte también. Ahora mismo estoy en esa, buscando la manera de mejorar también como persona también.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, Stephen. And we know for a fact that you are in Puerto Rico with that rooster cantando in the background. It is beautiful, serene background noise. I love it. I
got like 50 roosters running around.
That's awesome.
They're not mine, they're my neighbors.
That is so great. I want to remind our audience that today we are having a conversation around social activism in film, tales from the year that was. And today we have a phenomenal panelist that's really diving deep into their own work and their perceptions of film in the context of activism. Raymond, let's talk about, what are you currently working on? What messages are you trying to send? Emotions are you trying to evoke? Talk to us about what's happening today in your work.
Well, so again, Grey's Anatomy, Desperate Housewives, Lost, those all got to play in different genres. And I think through using genre, they get to play with characters and their relationships with one another. And I think that's where conflict arises. And so in some of the work that I'm doing now, I'm just trying to center queer Latinos at the forefront of genre spaces that maybe we haven't seen ourselves in, and just let them live. And so, I'm working on a pilot right now that's in the romance space and follows a gay Latino as he navigates post-breakup, what it means to have love in his life and how that changes from relationship to relationship. I feel like up to this point, when we do see queer romance, it's like you know, there's so much chemistry and they live happily ever after, but really understanding all the kind of nuances that we've seen in straight relationships in film and television, where, like, you know, maybe you're just not at that part of your life to be coupling up with someone. What does that relationship look like? Is it monogamous? How far into your coming out journey are you? All these things that maybe sometimes are the center piece of a film and TV show, all kind of playing out one episode by episode. And then very briefly, the other thing I'm working on is centering a gay Latino as like a scream queen of a horror pilot show. So like, you know, like an homage to Scream, but with the notion of a doppelganger. Every episode, this doppelganger is wreaking havoc on our main character, and the main character has to figure out how to stop the doppelganger from making him the primary suspect of a series of murders. So that one's you know, a lot more splashier, a lot more fun, and it's, for me, in this one, it's just really normalizing, like, this is the character that we're seeing the world through. This is his lens. This is his life. This is what his relationships look like, and how his identity and may or may not influence his actions as we navigate through his journey. And so I think a big part of my storytelling is just normalizing the characters that we see leading some of these stories.
Wow. Yeah, I think it's so important to decenter the white male hetero gaze that has dominated the film industry from a historical perspective. And so things that I try to align myself with are projects that center exactly what Raymond, SOFÍA, and Stephen are talking about. And so right now I've been collaborating with an award-winning children's book author. Her name is Raquel Ortiz, and she writes amazing children's books that I have right here. I'm working on a book trailer for her most recent Broken Butterfly Wings, Alas de Mariposa Rotas. And she really captures the imagination of young people through culture, through identity, through family. And another project that I'm working on, I'm really excited to be collaborating with Urban Theater Company, a theater company based out of Chicago. They're working on a new play that is going to be a hybrid play/movie. So we're gearing up for production, and that centers Latinx women and themes of faith, family, culture, etc.
That is phenomenal. I must say, I need to be a part of the preview for each and all of these projects, right? Like we're talking about decentralizing white heteronormative roles. We're talking about social movements, acknowledging and affirming communities. This is the work that is before us. And I cannot be more excited that young people are going to have film in which they can see themselves in, right? I cannot tell you how hard it is growing up as a masculine presenting Afro-Latina from Puerto Rico and not watch films with folks that look like me, living lives with families and in community, right? It's extremely important for young people to see themselves in film. As young filmmakers, bringing your vision of an activist film that drives meaningful change, right, is too often constrained by the realities of time and money. We know time and money controls everything. You know, SOFÍA couldn't have said it better. We don't have the time to give this documentary the details that it deserves, right? And we're often like constrained to that. And we have visions that are much greater than our reality. But let's just pretend for a moment, right? Second, these constraints don't exist, right? We have an infinite amount of time and billions of dollars in the bank, right? What would you do? Describe to me the films you would produce, the social issues you would cover, and where would you begin, right? Raymond, take us on a journey. You got billions of dollars in the bank. infinite amount of time, all of the resources, the equipment, none of those constraints are there, right? You can do whatever you want.
You know, I have a little like daily journal where I write any idea that pops into my head. But I kind of, as a kid watching films, I think the first two that excited me, I grew up Catholic Christian, was very religious, and space and dinosaurs seemed to confuse me a bit. And instead of running away from religion, my instinct was always to like problem solve. So I was like, well, this all has to like work with one another. Like the space and the dinosaurs, like God must have tried the dinosaurs before he tried us. And then like there's other planets. The Big Bang must have been like God. All these things. And that's the spaces that I want to play in, like big budget, like space and dinosaurs, or like sci-fi way into the future. Again, putting folks who may not always have the forefront of these narratives. And then kind of on the like complete opposite vein, because I have so much money that I can like be greenlighting so many projects at once. Some of my favorite kind of indie films in the English speaking side are like domestic dramas featuring middle-aged straight white men. And I'm like, I want to do that, but like I want like domestic dramas with queer Latinos or Latinos or other underrepresented communities. And so like, you know, like American Beauty or Sex, Lies, and Videotape, kind of in that vein. And so if I had tons of monies, I'd be trying to navigate the whole landscape, just be going for it.
I might be alone. I might be alone in my answer, but I'm not really moved by capital, and I'm more so moved by the relationships that I build on a day-to-day basis. And so I feel really content with where I am in my life, the amount of resources that I have, and going about my day, building those relationships and being inspired by the daily actions of the people that I surround myself with, and documenting that. That's my answer.
I'm happy to join that boat as well, honestly. I mean, I agree with you that, you know, what we do responds to the resources that are available, but I think that is so much a part of how I work and how I've always worked, that I think that there's also a kind of a whole approach and methodology, or even like a way of being with the material that relates to that, I guess. I mean, I personally, you know, don't harbor fantasies about unlimited resources for projects that I won't be able to make unless I have those resources. You know, I don't want to seem too harsh on the question itself, but to me, when I look sometimes at
it looks like she froze a bit. It's okay. She'll come back. I believe it. But, you know, you guys have like real activist answers. I guess this just wasn't the question for this panel, right? Like, I want to give you billions of dollars in unlimited resources and you don't want to use it. Fine. Whatever.
Take it back.
Maybe, well, maybe Steven does. Steven, you got billions of dollars in the bank, unlimited amount of resources. You tell me, what film are you producing? What are you going to make possible? What message do you want to send to the world with the best production you can ever produce?
Well, doing echo on SOFÍA and Matt's words, I think as filmmakers. No. Hear me out. So, us as filmmakers, we as we say in Puerto Rico or anywhere in Latin America, we say hacemos de tripas corazones. We make hearts out of guts, and I think I don't think it would be a matter of money, but more so of time and being able to do something outside of my constant work that I'm doing in the music industry and fashion films and corporate. But if if I had the money, I would go for I've been wanting to do a Bomba documentary and its variants throughout Latin America and maybe the world, because obviously we know that Bomba it derives from African ancestry, and you know the way how they used it, how to communicate when they were slaves, and it's a documentary that I've been wanting to do with along with my one of my brothers. We've been writing it for about 2 years, and you know, just getting in contact with different people from different parts of the island. Usually when you talk Bomba, you always think about Loíza, which is obviously like the mecca of Bomba in Puerto Rico, but Mayagüez is just as important in that regard. And I would just, you know, want to do a documentary that's educational, and you know, that I don't want to make money from it. I just want to do something that schools can use it to teach this and keep the culture alive. And I say keep the culture alive because in my hometown, Arecibo used to be a thriving place for Bomba in general, you know, for los bateis de Bomba. And I don't know why. I've been trying to, you know, find information or find people that know more about the history and the culture of Bomba in my hometown, but a lot of people that I've gotten to know from Mayagüez and other places have said that it was one of the biggest places that Bomba would take place, and I just want to keep that culture alive for future generations, and you know, just to have something that they can keep calling their own, and knowing that it'll be there for forever, you know. But that would be
Absolutely.
it. I'd say that'd be it.
Absolutely. And you know, SOFÍA has left us again. There's a blackout in Puerto Rico, and we know that the power infrastructure in Puerto Rico is weak, right? And I mean, it's devastation after devastation. Puerto Rico is having a hard time being able to really produce a power grid that is deserving, right? That the people of Puerto Rico deserve. And so we're hoping SOFÍA will make it back to us by the end of this conversation. I am praying that she does. But Stephen, you make a phenomenal point, right? I love Bomba. And yeah, I had the privilege as a young person directing a youth space here in Chicago called Bate Urbano, right? And it's called Bate Urbano because Bate was to be able to truly affirm and remember our history, right? And the meaning behind bates in our communities, the ability to do storytelling, right? Back in the day, we didn't have film, we didn't have cameras, we didn't have videographers to capture moments and pass down stories and to be able to pass down information to our children. Now we can do that through film, right? But Bate was the place that we've done that historically. And Bomba is probably one of the music genres that speaks to the resilience of a people, right? And so I am super proud that you have taken on such a topic, right? Because there are generations of Latinos, not just in Puerto Rico, but across Latin America, that have an Afro influence who do not know what Bomba is, right? There are many young people, Bomba or Rumba, that history is lost on us. And it's important for us to be able to pass it down through film, right? I want us to be able to pass advice to young people before we head out this afternoon. What is a message that you want to send young people about sending messages to young people and to the world through film? And SOFÍA, we're going to start with you. I'm so happy to see you back. Thank you. And I'm so sorry. Sorry about your blackout over there.
The power's been coming in and out for the last couple of days. I think what I was going to say when the power went out is it still works for this kind of closing message, which is the fact that, you know, I mean, as someone living in Puerto Rico during these times of bankruptcy, hurricanes, blackouts, earthquakes, you know, massive uprisings, like, I think my commitment to making art, and I think a lot of people's commitment to making art and films and here today, is kind of is in essence a commitment that just goes against the logic of capital and capitalism, right? Because it's not something that any of us are ever going to make any money off of or be able to live from. And so it has to kind of come from a different place. And for me, it's very much about recognizing, you know, the context in which I work and to be able to find ways to continue making regardless and to respond to my surroundings. And so, yeah, so I just hope that lack of resources doesn't hold anyone back from making the work that they want to be making.
Matt?
Some advice that I would give young people, I would say continue to practice any skill that you desire to have. We're living in a time where there's no real excuse to not be able to learn new software, you know, learn how to code, right? Like we can continually build these skills to make a better future for ourselves and for future generations. And I think also what I would like to say is that it's okay to walk without a destination in mind, and don't set heavy expectations on yourself or feel like, you know, you have to be doing something. You're okay where you are, and continue to build and grow and cultivate your creativity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I truly appreciate that response, Matt. Raymond, give young people in the world your thoughts.
Yeah, as a writer, I know the main reason why I went into writing to begin with was just because I was nervous that I wouldn't be able to like raise funds to make a lot of what y'all are talking about, raise funds to make projects as a director or a producer. And as a writer, all I needed was like a pen and paper and eventually like cell text or final draft. I think as a writer, the most important thing to do is to write and continue writing and continue reading, you know, colleagues, things that are getting made, novels, writing just to also just keep your brain going and soaking up information. And for me, the most exciting thing is to be playing in different genres and spaces, and also continuously seeking feedback. You know, we were talking about earlier how we've all done a ton of unlearning of things that we've just taken for granted, either by our culture or by media or these other spaces. And so being the creators of your own art, there may be some blind spots that you have and you may just not know. And so I think another big important piece to writing and creating is having a group of people surrounding you that are honest, who will tell you when maybe, hey, you may have not checked this spot, or I think you might want to look into this, and have those conversations and be open to that feedback and that criticism.
Absolutely. That is gold, right? That advice is precious. And I hope that every young person who's watching it today is like writing notes viciously. Stephen, tell us, what do you have to offer? What piece of advice would you give young people who are seeking maybe to do film and also pass down history and talk about social issues? Tell us your thoughts and don't forget to unmute.
So I'd say don't get too held back by what equipment you use, how much money you have to develop the you know, the projects that you want to put out into the world. But also, you know, to educate yourselves on the issues that are, you know, that we're living through right now, and if, you know, see how you can cómo puedes aportar, how you can add value to, you know, to your community, to your industry, and seek, you know, tratar de conseguir la información necesaria para poder desarrollar esos proyectos de una manera in a conscious way, and you know, as Raymond was saying, take into account other people, other communities, and when you're developing these projects. And besides that, I'd say just go out and film, just go out and shoot and practice. I think Matt was the one that said it. Practice every day, keep shooting, keep creating, and don't block yourselves creatively and with these trivial things that some people get held back on stuff like what camera should I use, what lens. Nowadays you see stuff made on an iPhone or cameras that came out 5-6 years ago, 10 years ago, and are still relevant. The content is what's important. Content is king, and what you put into those projects is it's it's important. Sorry.
No, it's completely okay. I want to thank all of you all for being here with us. I mean, this hour went by so quickly. And I'm so sad that we're going to end this conversation. I want to say a couple of things, right? You all, with your work, will make the world a better place. There are going to be young people who look like me, who look like you, who are trans, who are non-binary, who are Puerto Rican, Afro-Caribbean people from the Bronx in the neighborhood. There are going to be people who see a future in themselves and a world of possibilities because of a vision that you all have for a world of film. We watch television throughout every moment of our lives, right? Think about what you're doing as a toddler when your mom's trying to get breakfast, lunch, and dinner together and clean the house, right? They put young people in front of a TV. We also engage with film in educational settings, right? Sometimes we dive into film to escape a reality that doesn't feel so good for us, right? You all are creating a world of film that can articulate a reality that popular film does not, right? And so it won't be escaping, it will be affirming the very presence and essence of who we are as a people, acknowledging social movements and grappling with isms and injustices across the world. And so I could not be more grateful to moderate and facilitate a panel with such brilliant minds. And I'm sure that I will be watching award ceremonies in the next 10 to 15 to 20, 30 years, and you all are going to be accepting those awards. And so it's been a pleasure. Thank you all for being here. It is goodbye for now, but we are going to have some amazing conversations, I'm sure, in other places and in other settings. Thank you, guys. I want to move us forward and announce some things that are coming up. I want to remind the audience that is watching here today, the Conversation Among X series leads up to our film festival. On September 18th, we received over 400 films. Can you imagine young people being so inspired that we've received over 400 films? The film festival will start on September 18th. Please visit our website to follow the festival, to get information, and to see what future opportunities exist for you. But more importantly, Conversation Among X is not finished just yet. The next episode is September 22nd. Compelling documentaries, real stories for real change. That will be moderated by my co-moderator, Lorena Rusi. I'm so excited to have been here with you all today, to have facilitated meaningful conversation. And I hope that we asked questions and we stirred up emotions that you can take in conversations with your friends, in classrooms, in the community, to continue to dive deep. Thank you again. Let's take a look at the amazing sponsors that make this series possible.
Thanks to our sponsors, we continue to have important conversations that educate and inspire the most valuable asset for a brighter future, the new generation of Latinx creatives. Visit cineyouthfest.org to find out more, because tú cuentas. Alex Guzman was an activist, an advocate, a fierce and compelling fighter for social justice and human rights. The struggle continues, and it is better because he was involved. Rest in the light, Alex. We all have a story to tell, and your story matters. Now more than ever, that's why we've created CINE Youth Fest, a cinema festival and a platform for independent voices, positive change, stories of heroism from the lens of a Latinx experience. Join the adventure on our website, cineyouthfest.org. There, you will find all you need to participate in the competition. The rules of the game, Latinx in film, where you find out how important we really are. Classes behind the camera with people who know. Stories from others like you who have a dream, big ideas, and awesome goals. Raise your voice to be heard. Show off to be seen. And be part of history sharing your story. Lights, camera, acción. Because tú cuentas. Powered by HE